Hi, this is Eric Roscoe Ambel, and you're listening to Frets with DJ Fey.
That's Eric Ambel and friends on his classic album Roscoe's Gang, a record produced by Eric along with Lou Whitney and featuring Ron Rongo Grimp, Donnie Thompson, and Joe Terry. Today I pick up where we left off in my discussion with Eric Roscoe Ambel. You're listening to Frets with DJ Fey. No lessons, no technique info. I just talk to people who play guitar. Stay tuned. When you told me you'd like to do the show, I kept thinking, this concert, I'm talking about the house concert, I kept thinking that was the only time I would have ever seen you play in person, but then I flashed back and remembered another show 10 years prior to that, back in 2003. Some friends of mine and I made a pilgrimage down to Nashville to see Steve Earle and the Dukes play at the Exit Inn. So if I have my timeline and dates right, you would have been in that band at that time, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The Exit, that's a great club. I think it got saved, what I refer to as the real estate monster, has been gobbled up New York City. It's been gobbling up Nashville at an alarming speed and, making, that block that they call the rock block, it was a congregating place. And things like the Gold Rush, you could get out of your car and you could go to like 5 places right there. But I guess the Exit Inn has been saved from the developers' wrecking ball. I mean, that's a pretty great club. A lot of people have played there. And then there's a little bar called The End, which is right next door. I don't know if it's kind of in the alley. I love playing the Exit Inn.
Yeah, I haven't been to a show there in years, but that Exit Inn experience was part of a bachelor party weekend for my good friend Vince Cook, who's also a guitarist, and who met his guitar playing wife, Lori, at an open mic bar up in Chicago.
Nice.
So, hey, Vinny. Hey, Lori. I got to say hello to those guys.
Nice.
Oh, one more thing about the Steve Earle years I wanted to mention. One of my favorite songs you played guitar on is America version 6.0 from Jerusalem. You played that, right?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, and that song, we had been working on that song. We didn't play it live, but we had been working on it at sound checks on the road. And we would go out on tour for 3 or 4 weeks, and then there'd be a break, and then there'd be another run. And at that point, we were on the bus. Maybe we had one more gig, and then we were headed home. And out of the blue, Steve said, "Yeah, well, we're going to record that at Roscoe's place before we split up again." And I was like, what? So, I had my recording studio, Cowboy Technical Services, since 1999. But at the time, Steve would have been the most high-profile person to be there. And all of my... we're in our 3rd location now, but all of our places have been set up in a non-traditional sort of no control room type setup where the band is literally in the same room with the console. So that's a little more known nowadays. Back then, like people heard of Daniel Lanois doing that in a house in New Orleans, but it wasn't that common. So, it was a little nerve-wracking to both play on that and have to put the recording situation together. We had to rent some equipment too, because Steve's longtime engineer and producer, Ray Kennedy, wanted us to use a specific type of compressor, the old 1176, so we had to rent a bunch of 1176s, and that song came out great. And I had just gotten a new snare drum, and in the intro, it's just the song starts out with just the drums,
right.
And I had gotten this new snare drum, and that day after we cut the song, Will Rigby goes, "Gosh, look at this!" And you know how the bottom head is clear very often, and one of the lug screws, every time he hit the drum, there's like this rattling because the nut had come off of the lug screw, and it's next time you listen to it, listen closely to the intro, and you can hear this nut bouncing around on the drum head every time he hits a snare drum.
I will put the headphones on and listen to that again.
You'll hear it. It sounds like he's dragging his stick on the head, but it's not a drag. It's that nut bouncing around.
And here all this time, I thought that was intentional, so love it. I confess I'm one of those guys who plays guitar, has a few guitars, but doesn't really know much about the inner workings of a guitar. But a couple of years ago, before the whole 2020 lockdown, I was in a band that got together once a week to play. We never went anywhere. We never played out, but we got together to play mostly for fun. And at that time, I had been experiencing some like really bad neck and upper back pain, just a bad experience with that. And two of the guitars I have are pretty heavy, so that didn't help. And where I'm going with this is I started learning about her. I was looking into, I didn't know whether, there was a specific back harness or strap or something. I felt kind of pathetic at the time. I was like, what could I do to like take some of the weight off? And then I started learning a little bit about chambered guitars that are made, they not only produce a different sound, but I guess there are sections of the body that are routed out and it also makes them considerably lighter.
Yeah, I had similar spinal problems, trouble, to the point eventually I had to have surgery, but I kind of worked on, when I was playing with Steve, I got into riding bicycles, and I got into kind of working on bicycles, and as the Wright brothers would tell you, that if you can work on a bicycle, you can work on almost anything. And at the same time, I had played a couple of Gretsch guitars, and I learned about the chambering from them. And I started going through everything in my rig to make it lighter if I could, the way cyclists do. And so some of the things I would do is I found a guy who made amp cabinets replacement cabinets out of pine instead of plywood or particle board. It would take drastic amount of weight off of the amp. And that's the way the old amps, from the 50s and 60s, they didn't use plywood. They used pine, and it sounded great, and it was much lighter. And there's a type of speaker called a Neo speaker, which also can take a lot of weight off. And then these chambered guitars, I had been working with a company, this builder in Wyoming. He's moved around a lot. I think he's in Washington now, but Stone Tree Guitars. And he built me a chambered guitar And then since then, I found that Gibson was making them. The custom shop makes a really, you can get a chambered Les Paul, and I have a couple of those, and they, the weight comes down by a couple of pounds. And, the difference between a 9-pound guitar and a 7-pound guitar is pretty drastic.
Sure.
So at this point, I have a couple Stone Trees that are chambered. I have chambered Les Pauls. I have a guitar by this custom maker called Swope that is also chambered. And in addition to the weight savings, I think they just sound great. Like the Stone Tree ones have a spruce top like an acoustic guitar. And the Les Pauls with the chambering, this is very confusing because Gibson also does a thing called weight relief, which is that's because they can't find wood that's light enough for the guitars, so they just cut holes in it. And when they first started doing it, these were just like, it looked like Swiss cheese. They just cut these 2-inch holes in the body but the chambered ones, it's actually a tone chamber that goes around the sides of the guitar. And if you've ever been lucky enough to play a real Les Paul from, a pre-1960 Les Paul, those guitars are made with old growth mahogany that usually lighter and has they're drier. They just have a more of a character than the sort of heavy, more generic Les Paul that the company made from 1968 on when they started making Les Pauls again. I just love the chambered guitars. If you go online, there's a lot of guys who will tell you why you shouldn't play a chambered guitar, but most of those are not, they're like keyboard warriors, and they're not professional musicians or guys who play gigs or record. It's really something else. Billy Gibbons, that's all he plays, unless he's got his old guitar out there, which he rarely takes,
If you're a podcast addict like me, you might have thought about starting your own. I'm having a lot of fun creating and sharing my podcast, Frets with DJ Fey. It seemed daunting at first, and I had no idea how to proceed after recording my first episodes. Then I discovered Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout has helped over 100,000 people, even knuckleheads like me, launch a podcast. The tools they provide make it incredibly easy to get your thing going. They'll also help you get your podcast into all the major podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. You get a great-looking website, audio players to drop into other websites, analytics, and tools to promote your podcast. They help with it all. Learn the ins and outs of podcasting through people who eat, drink, and breathe it. Buzzsprout, the easiest way to start a podcast. Now, back to mine. Well, I love New York, and one thing I really regret is that I never got to experience Lakeside Lounge.
Well, that was a funny thing. My partner, the Hound, Jim Marshall, he had a radio show on WFMU, throughout the 80s and early 90s. Just a fantastic, rollicking radio show, record collector, but irreverent, crazy. I used to do a segment on there, the State of the Vibe Report. But we helped a lot of places get going, like there was a club, Brownies, and also the Mercury Lounge. But, those clubs, I had a hand in the design of the Mercury Lounge, and, the Brownies, my band played maybe the very first gig at Brownies when they didn't even, that was just a bar, and they had this raised area in the back with the English Dart set up, and we were like, hey, I think we could set up and play a gig in here. you know? So we had done enough for other people promoting their place. You know, we were like, I think it's time to have our own bar. And we found this location, and it was just it only took us, I think, 5 weeks from when we signed the lease to being open. The Bottle Rockets played the opening night. You know, we just had tons of great people play there over the years. A lot of bands that are from the area would play their first gig there. And then we had a lot of famous people too, because friends that we knew from all over the country would go and do like the TV shows, you know, like Letterman or, you know, and then they'd come down. You know, those shows are taped at 5:00, so then they got the whole night, and a lot of them would come down and play the gig at our place. It was pretty ideal. You know, eventually we got sort of the real estate monster, like I said, gobbled us up. You know, when we opened, our rent was $2,200, and when we left, the rent, you know, 16 years later, the rent was $11,000 a month.
Yikes.
You know, in that period, we had raised the price of a beer $1, you know? So it just, and also at the time, I think when we closed, I think it was 2014, but we also started to see the writing on the wall. Awful lot of people were moving to Brooklyn, and you know, so we started doing some happy hour shows so people could, you know, come down right from work before they went home for the night. I always thought, you know, wouldn't it be great to have your own little bar in some small town and have equipment there so a place would be ready to go if somebody wanted to play. And then at one point I realized, wow, I did that. I did that in New York City. I did that in the East Village for 16 years, you know, and all kinds of people played there, you know. So
I do love that the site is still up, so you can go look at this pretty long list of great bands and artists who played there over the years. It's very cool.
Yeah, and we also have our the list of what was on the jukebox at the time the place closed is still on there.
Oh, nice.
And that was it. Our jukebox was the definite star of the place.
Is there a band or a musician that you really like that might surprise some people?
Well, I don't know. You know, I talked about the marching band thing. You know, I love a lot of different kinds of music, and I learned so much from playing, you know, learning to play the piano and trumpet and you know, I guess what you're asking is some kind of guilty pleasure thing.
Not necessarily, but yeah, sure.
But, you know, Glen Campbell, that's somebody that I always liked. And then, you know, to have him, that last album that he made with the guy, Julian Raymond, the producer, the Ghost on the Canvas. I mean, that's an unbelievable, that's like a career high record almost for a guy to do that when he's, you know, starting to feel the effects of dementia.
Right.
Just beyond me. I also I really like Lindsey Buckingham. There's almost always something that I can find on one of his records, and if I was kind of the impromptu DJ at a party, I can't imagine too much time going without me playing one of those two artists, or maybe something like some Cheap Trick, just because that's where I'm from.
Hey, I want to talk about Plug. Plug makes it easy for you to purchase the personal technology you need at 40 to 70% off retail pricing. What can you get from Plug? Certified pre-owned devices including iPhones, Androids, AirPods, Macs, smartwatches, accessories, and more. I originally didn't even want an Apple Watch, but I got one from Plug and I love it. I wear it every day. Your purchase is backed by their unmatched 1-year warranty and 30-day money-back guarantee. One more very cool thing, Plug is dedicated to helping reduce e-waste around the globe. To date, Plug has helped save over 1 million devices from reaching landfills, and they're looking to double that number by 2025. Link to Plug Tech from the show notes, and check out all the great deals and savings on certified pre-owned devices. Plug Electronics. Check it out. Well, if we can ever get past these difficult times and start traveling more often, I do want to get back to New York. And when I do, what are the chances that I could pay a visit to Cowboy Technical Services? Or is it like a closed set? No one can come in.
Well, you let me know, and we'll figure it out. My own personal cliche would be everything good starts at lunch, so we could have some lunch. One of the great aspects of that, the way that I've got my studio set up with the no control room thing, is that in a studio setup like that, there's about as much room for guests as there is on the field of play during a baseball game. Wow. Like you don't get to bring your chair and put it out by second base, and in all the time that I've been making records, I've never seen anything good happen in a studio when guests were there, aside from maybe somebody stopping by for lunch and listening to a couple tunes, and then they're on their way. And that the no control room place, I'm sure we can accommodate you, but it's not a go to work with dad place. Right. When you're making a record, you've got all these people together. You've got the rhythm section. You've got the guy who wrote the song. You've got the other hot player. You've got the supportive. All these people, and the interactions are very intimate, and all it takes to throw the whole thing off is just one person to come in the room, and then everybody gets off their, they're thinking about something else. It's just, I've never seen it, guests help a recording session. Now, I'm new at this. I've only been doing it for 42 years.
Right.
So,
no, I was thinking more. Yeah, I would definitely not want to interrupt a recording session. I was just more wanted to come look at your guitars. And,
absolutely.
Maybe have a sandwich or something.
Yeah, we'd have some lunch. That can be done.
I like that. Well, you've been an incredibly busy and prolific musician and producer for many years now. What's your next project? What's the next project for Eric Ambel?
Well, I've always got a few going at the same time. Recently at Cowboy Technical, we had to have there's some foundation work being done on the building. So we had to kind of decommission our space while they go in there. And the positive thing is that, to use a phrase of the current president, that we're going to build back better. But right now we're in we merged with another friend who has a recording studio in the same building. So there's no work interruption, and, we've got some of our stuff up there. But I did the recording for maybe 3 or 4 albums before we decommissioned our place. So now I'm working on all those records to get them finished. There's the various overdubs and editing before you go to mixing. So, like right now, I have records, a Sarah Borges record that's ready to mix, artist Jerry Joseph that I produced. His record is almost ready to mix. There's things that came out recently, Emily Duff and Ward Hayden and Outliers, and also Eric Huey record. So I'm kind of working on the sort of tasters for those to get them ready for mixing. Since the pandemic, I have not played a single gig yet. I'm just have been waiting for things to be safe.
Sure. Not
just for myself, but for people that go to gigs and people that work at the venues. So New York City, they have a vaccine passport app, the Excelsior Pass, and they just today, I think, is the first day that they're, all bars and restaurants and gyms, a couple other things require a vaccine to get in starting today. So, yeah, I have a gig that I play. There's a guy that I produced named Mark McKay, and he has a regular gig at this place, the 11th Street Bar. It's East Village Irish bar. And so I'm playing with him in a couple of weeks, and I'm hoping everything goes okay.
Well, Eric, I can't thank you enough for being a guest on the show.
My pleasure, Dave. Thank you.
Next time on Frets, tune into a great talk with Nashville session guitarist Joe V. McMahon. Stay tuned.